Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? Hi, I'm Nathan Mercero, CEO of Planning Alternatives. We're a disruptive brand in the financial planning space with a point of view that true wealth has nothing to do with money. Growing up in a small town in Canada, I experienced examples of families with money and without. It started me on this journey of understanding wealth and the idea that spending a day in a canoe with someone could be one of the best investments you could make. Join me as I sit down with leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, rule breakers, and friends to discover their perspective of true wealth. And maybe you'll start to shift yours. Well, I'm delighted today to be joined by Pierre Du Plessis, who is joining us on a transcontinental canoe trip here out of Cape Town, South Africa. And Pierre, welcome to Day in a Canoe. I love that we've already had a conversation about some meaningful topics. You're a strategist, speaker, author. You're helping leaders and organizations gain clarity. And your master's research is on an interesting topic of loneliness. Why are we lonely?
Why are we lonely? That is a really, really good question. And one of the questions that I asked in my research, obviously. But first of all, thank you for having me. It's fun talking to you again. But we are lonely because some of the systems and structures in our society has started to break down. So loneliness is also a normal feeling. First of all, let's just say that it's a normal thing that happens to people, and it's always happened. And it's a signal or an indicator that you need community, right? That you need people around you, and it's a sort of a drive, basic instinct, right? The challenge is we are always lonely, or we're always lonely some of the time. But what's been happening in our society in the last 2 decades to 3 decades is that loneliness has been radically increasing and is starting to become a very, very real challenge. And during the pandemic, we discovered that the true pandemic is actually loneliness. So we are lonely, to answer your question, because our societies aren't set up to be communal anymore. So one of the things that started happening is we lose the normal social structures that we used to have, the traditional structures, things like your local union that you belong to, or the men's club that you belong to, the Rotary Club, for example, the Lions Club, or the many variations of those around the world. We've lost those traditional ones and they're dying out. And then we've also lost traditional structures like churches, going to churches regularly or any kind of religious institution and finding that community there. Like those have broken down, and those have been detrimental in causing loneliness and breaking apart communities. And then we also have various other things playing in on loneliness, something like the housing crisis, for example. So here in Cape Town, which is a world city where it's increasingly expensive to buy a property, people tend to rent. And when you rent, you don't get to know your neighbors because nobody is sort of investing long-term into a neighborhood anymore. So the very fiber of the city starts to change. And if you couple that and combine it with the rise in remote work, especially after COVID, people hardly leave their apartments. So they don't go to a office. They sit in their rented apartment, and then they work for a business that's maybe in Europe or in the States, or maybe just in another city, or maybe nowhere. And they don't get to connect to other people anymore. So now you have remote work playing into it. You have like the housing crisis, people not being able to afford housing anymore. And then you have the traditional structures falling away that sort of enabled community. And then you also have the rise of the digital. So people tend to blame social media very quickly when it comes to loneliness. It's definitely not the only culprit, but it is a culprit. There was some very interesting research done on social media saying that you should not have nothing, because it's become integral to our society, and too little social media actually also causes loneliness. So they talk about, the paper talks about the Goldilocks amount of social media is about 20 minutes per day. So if you do less than 20 minutes a day, you feel disconnected from what is going on in the world and in your friends' lives. If you do more than 20 minutes a day, which, to be fair, most people actually do more than 20 minutes a day, then you start feeling like you're missing out. So there's this little sweet spot, but it's only 20 minutes that actually makes you feel less lonely. More than that will make you feel more lonely. So those are just a couple of things that are causing the rise in loneliness over the past 2 or 3 decades.
That's great insight. So what's the recipe or the stepping stones for someone who is listening and saying, I relate to that, I'm feeling lonely? It's not just a moment in time. There's like a structural aspect, as you described, that may be in play. What's your input to that person who is saying, I'm interested in change, but how do I carve the path forward?
But how do I carve the path forward? Yeah, it's a very good question. So it's actually really, really simple. So you need to establish a very predictable rhythm and some core practices to help you deal with your loneliness. So, for example, if you have a local coffee shop or a local place you can go to, is to go to the same place all the time. Do not go to different coffee shops all the time, but just go to the same place. If you're going to a grocery store, oh, that's one of the other things. The rise in online shopping and groceries getting delivered in 60 minutes or 30 minutes or less or whatever it is that's also causing loneliness, because that regular interaction with the store clerk, with the barista, and if you go to the same place often enough, people will get to know you, and then it becomes your place. And then those little tiny, what the one researcher called micro interactions. So that little interaction with the barista of saying hi, or not even saying hi, just the interaction of buying a coffee from the same person every day, or that little interaction that you have with a person behind the checkout, that they would, smile at you, or maybe even that little frustration when you have to wait in line and you have to navigate other people all of a sudden. And that actually helps alleviate loneliness quite a bit. So that's one thing, like micro interactions at your local places. So build like a local rhythm to where you can have these little micro interactions. And then one of the things is to intentionally go and find a community, to go and find a tribe of some sort, whether it be at a religious institution, if you are, then, or at something like the CrossFit gym has become very popular for people over the last kind of 20 years as well. So where you can meet with regular people or just meet the same people all the time. And in those places, you can start to form community. So it's literally putting yourself out there and risking a little bit, which many people are scared of. But what I found in my research specifically is that loneliness is not only an invitation to community, it's first of all also an invitation to vulnerability. So that when you are lonely, to say that to your friends or to your family or to the people around you, that's saying that I am lonely or I need this, to be able to vocalize what you actually need and to be vulnerable in that point, in that space. So that vulnerability is actually what leads to true and deep friendship and community. So without vulnerability, you'll only stay at a shallow end. But we need both. So there's like spheres of community that we need in our life. We need like the public sphere where we belong to a certain tribe because we went to this college or we stayed in this city. And then we have our social sphere, and then we have our intimate sphere. So it gets narrower and narrower as we close down. So we need all of those. The big ones you can handle with sort of micro interactions and starting to support a certain sports team, and it makes you feel part of something bigger than yourself. But then also the ones closer to you, the friendship circle, those ones are built on vulnerability. So once you get to that level of friendship, is to be intentionally vulnerable and to be that first, and which is risky and scary. But those are the kind of first things I would say. Micro interactions. Find some sort of tribe or community or regular gathering that you can go to, whether it's a running club, whether it's a church or some sort of religious institution or a union of some sort. And then to be vulnerable to the people that you do meet, and to build your local regular communities. Like go to your same coffee shop, go to the same grocery store, and get out of the house.
You provide insight to leaders, speak to various organizational groups. You've been a thought leader on this topic, as well as organizational development and human capital, the development of the humanity of what everyone has as potential. What have you found is a message that you share that will either provoke people, they're like, oh, that changes my point of view, or you might find that it lands and it really motivates people. What's been your experience?
Oh, yes. Well, one of the things that I often tell organizations is stop trying to be the best. And then they go, what? We shouldn't be the best? It's like, no, you shouldn't be the best. I think the best is a stupid game. So trying to be the best as an organization on an organizational level is a futile game and a terrible one to play, because it only ends up you trying to be either cheaper or faster than anybody else. And that really never goes well. Like, you can only be as fast as the technology allows. So it's very difficult to be faster than anybody else. And that horizon is like, that cliff's edge or horizon is coming closer very, very fast, ironically. And then the other one is to be cheaper. So cheaper, faster, and nicer. Yeah. So cheaper, you can only be as cheap before start eating into your margin, right? So, and then the last one is to be nicer. So people always, when we run strategy sessions, they'll go, well, one of our strategic pillars is customer service. Of course it's customer service. Like, everybody has customer service. Like, you can't be a business without customer service. It's like a bank saying we have integrity. It's like, you're a bank. You should have integrity. That's sort of permission to play values. So those three things, cheaper, faster, nicer, is what it means to be the best. And that's a very, very difficult game and very difficult to measure. And you just end up with these vague goals and a very frustrated team. So an easier strategy or easier thing to do is to be weird, is to be different. Because there's something that you can be, and this is true for humans and humans inside an organization and for the organization as a whole as well, is that weird thing that only you can be, that only your organization can be, then there's no competition. It's the classic blue ocean, red ocean strategy, and it's been said a million times by a million different people. But it's always so interesting to me how provoking that is for people. They go, no, we're just going to go faster. We're just going to become cheaper. It's like, well, what if you become weirder? What if you become more strange? What if you become more unique? Like, what is the unique blend of things that you as an organization or as a person actually brings to the world? What is that? So that's fascinating. For example, a quick one. One of my friends who's an accountant is also really interested in numerology. And he's like, well, I've got these two worlds. And it's like, both numbers, both very, very different. And once he puts those things together, it becomes so interesting when he starts coaching people on their finances and on their outlook in life and running all these things. It's such an interesting thing that there's just no competition out there for him. So be a little bit weirder. Stop trying to be the best.
Good advice. Now, you work at the intersection between behavior and strategy, is understanding some of the speaking topics that you've shared. Is a behavior that a lot of companies underestimate. Maybe it's latent and they're just not tuned into it. What is that one thing that you've observed that is a surprise behavioral strength?
I think one of the behaviors that I always encourage companies to build is to, and it sounds weird because you also need to be weird, but you need to be a little bit more consistent and predictable in your rhythms. And what people tend to, I think what successful leaders do and successful businesses do, is they have a very clear rhythm when it comes to executing their strategy. And I think it was Vern Haynish that said, routine will set you free. And rhythm, I always talk about rhythm is your salvation. Like, if you have no idea what to do, just keep the rhythm. Just keep that drum beat going. So, and when you're doing strategy or trying to execute a strategy, you need a rhythm to keep you accountable, because strategy exists on a higher level than your daily operations, because daily operations always sucks people in, and then all the urgent things that tend to happen in the business, and then they sort of leave the strategy aside. And the ones that are successful are the ones that will defend that hourly meeting once a week, or that quarterly half a day or a day kind of check-in, or the annual strat meeting, that really defend that time with their lives. Those are the ones that succeed and that win, because then they actually get to move the needle, or they actually move the needle.
You have a podcast with the title Through the Fog, and I was fortunate enough to spend time with you, and I spoke longer than I ever imagined I could share my story in a podcast. So thank you for pulling that out of me. What's your motivation behind that podcast, and what types of conversations are you finding resonate with people now?
So it's my motivation for that podcast. I think my mission generally in life at the moment is to help people and businesses find their way. So strategy is the short word for that, but it's really about discernment and figuring out what to do and what not to do. Because at the heart of strategy, whether it's for yourself or for your business, is decision making. It's going, we're going to do this, not this. I'm going to do this, not that. And what I'm always interested in, and increasingly so, is how people make those decisions. Not necessarily so much what they choose to do, but how they got there. So saying you were faced with these two things. I remember from your story as well, like going to work in the family business or not. And then why did you make that decision? Like, how did you make that decision? What caused you to do that? I think it comes from also a deeply personal place where in my life, I mean, I'm in my late 40s now, and ever since my 30s, experienced this sort of classic midlife crisis, or rather maybe call it a passage, where you sort of build a life and then you all of a sudden you get to this place, or I got to this place where you go, this is not what I wanted, or this is not what I thought it was going to be, or I didn't build the thing that I wanted to build or could build. Now, what do I do now? And one of my friends who was also on the podcast, Dion Chang, talks about the midlife journey as hacking your way through the fog. Like the fog descends and now you have to figure out your way. And I think that's very powerful. So my mission and my podcast is really just for me to have cool conversations with people and then hear their stories, and for me to learn how people find their way. Like, how do they make a decision? Because it's so powerful. It's the most powerful thing that any human being can do, is to make and own a decision.
What has been a decision in your life that has been defining to help you get through the fog?
Oh, it's I think one of the decisions that helped me get through the fog is to be really intentional about who I let into my inner circle, to help me figure out and be really honest mirrors to me. So that has been one of the biggest influences in my life in the way that I make decisions, is my inner circle, to bounce things off of my best friend and off of my wife and my mentors and these people, to say, this is what I'm thinking, but I need to think this through with somebody else, not get advice. Like, it's not the same thing. I just need you to ask me questions so I can get to a place of clarity. That's been absolutely fundamental. And then the same is true for my life. One of the biggest decisions is rhythm. So to keep a rhythm of journaling, of discernment, of sitting and reflecting really deeply on my life, to then make a decision from that space, to not make a decision from a space of lack or a space of jealousy or envy, to rather make a decision from a very true place. I think that's been fundamental to me.
Final question, given that we're chatting at the beginning of a new year, what is your wish for 2026?
So I normally, I mean, that's what many people do, and it's maybe a bit trite, but I pick a word or a phrase for a year. And this year, it feels like my word is not a word, but a number, and it's the number 8. So 8 for me is a really interesting one, because there's a very big tradition in Christian tradition of the 8th day of the week, which is the day of resurrection, the first day of the new week. And also the early churches were all built in octagons. So the eight-sided church. So there's this idea behind that the 8th day of the week is this mysterious, powerful day, a day of new beginnings, a day of transformation, a day of stepping into the true self, and really letting that shine, letting that come forth. So that's sort of what I'm feeling for at this point. I mean, we're in Cape Town, I'm still pretty much on holiday or on vacation, but that's sort of what I'm feeling for this year, is the number 8, transformation, renewal, resurrection. That's interesting for me.
Love it. Pierre, thank you so much for sharing your insight. It's been a pleasure that we've chatted today. Glad our paths crossed, and look forward to staying in touch.
Cool, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. To discover what wealth means to you, please take our assessment at planningalt.com.